Okay, so one of the questions that I often get asked is how to re-enter after a pause or a time away. Now, the pause or time away could be about just getting off of social media, but the business is still running and you're still doing things, or the pause could be from the business itself. It could mean any kind of thing, right? But one of the things that I often get asked is, well, do I announce it? Do I not announce it? What do I say if I do announce it? So, these questions, and I actually want to give you three questions to ask yourself, right? To lay out your re entry strategy, is what I'm calling it. That's what we'll be talking about in this episode today. Okay. All right. So, let's address the first question that I shared that often gets asked. If you have gone away for a period of time off of social media or, from your business as a whole, number one, and I think this is important, it's always a personal preference to what degree you make an announcement or to what degree you share about your return. Okay. But I am pro you acknowledging the fact that you have been away. Okay. Again, now the degree to which you communicate about being away, personal preference, a lot of things go into that. But I am pro you acknowledging it. And the reason why is because you need people to trust you. And guess what doesn't create trust? Inconsistency, right? There are people on the internet who make tons of money just by being consistent. They're wrong, to be clear. They're experts. They're not actually good. I mean, they're not experts. They're not good at what they do. So I'm thinking of a person, for example, who I hired to help me write copy, right? I think she was writing a sales page. Yeah, she was writing a sales page. And one of the reasons why I hired her is the level of consistency, right, that she has in her content. Now, obviously, it isn't just consistency, but that was the biggest reason, right? They was like, oh, this right here is a good point, and this right here actually makes sense, right? So obviously there's some level of expertise, right, that also prompted me to buy. But by and large, the number of people who will buy from you simply because you show up consistently is a lot of people, right? Now, it creates a whole different problem in terms of retention, profit margins, et cetera, et cetera. But I make the point that consistency is such a big part of building trust, right? Do you trust somebody in a relationship that's inconsistent? No, you do not. Okay. So, does that mean that you can't take a break? Of course not. Do what you feel like you need to do that is best for you, always. Okay. However, when it comes to returning, right, acknowledgement goes a long way. Accountability goes a long way. Now, I am not saying that you need to share personal details about why you were away. I'm not saying that you need to give some kind of dissertation, right, about why you were away. I love it when you focus on the future, right, and really less on the past, right? Things like, what will you be talking about now? Now that you are returning, what should I expect? How often will you be posting? Right. Again, I'm not suggesting that you have to share every single one of those things. I am saying that when you acknowledge your time away, step straight into the future. Hey, I'm going to be doing jokes and laughs for the next couple weeks. Uh, Tap in, right? It doesn't even have to be about the business. It doesn't even have to be, you know, here's what to expect from me from a business. Now, it can be, right? But I am pro you making an announcement that is more of an acknowledgement of your time away and more of a here's what to expect from me moving forward, less of a personal details. Again, I'm not anti personal details, but I do think that that's more of a personal preference. Okay. Here's really what I want to share though. The three questions that I want you to think about. And the reason is because depending on the answers, to these three questions determines what you specifically should be doing, right? A lot of times people are giving you um, kind of universal strategies. Well, you should be doing this on social. And it's like, well, it kind of depends. What you should be specifically doing when you are re-entering. Let's see. Okay. So the first question is, how clear are you? Okay. And these are all questions that I want you to be asking yourself. That's number one. Number two is, what is your goal? Okay. I'm going to go through these in a little more detail. And number three is, what assets, what resources do you have? Okay. Because what you specifically should be doing is based on those three things, right? Some of my clients have sold their company and they have cash from the sale, right? And they're going to be starting a brand new business. Okay, well, that person's goals, clarity, and resources are different than someone who didn't sell their company, right? Some of my clients are pivoting their audience, right? They're going from one target market to another, or one market segment to another, or one industry to another. And it's like, okay, how clear are you? What's the goal? What resources do you already have? Right? Sometimes you're pivoting an offer and not an audience. Okay. Some of my clients, this is one of probably more and more what I see happening with my clients, is those who have had brick and mortars, right? And then decide to build online. Uh, that requires a whole different set of answers. Why? Because that person doesn't have an audience, right? So how would you approach that? My point is, there are all of these different scenarios as to how people begin to pivot, why they pivot, divorce, and I lost my confidence. Okay, well, that's going to require a different set of rules, right? Sick, physically sick, and I have less capacity. Okay, that might, have a different set of rules. So my point here is, ask yourself these three questions. Number one, how clear are you? And when I say how clear are you, think about the core elements of your business. You don't have to have certainty, right? We're not looking for certainty, we're looking for clarity. Certainty is an illusion, it cannot be obtained, okay? But clarity 100% can. Sometimes we confuse the two and we spend a lot of time trying to be certain, and that's not a thing, right? And then other times we don't spend enough time trying to get clear, right? So when we think about clarity, it is your brand, right? What is your brand all about, especially if you're starting something new? But even if you're repositioning yourself, that's a good question about your audience, your offer, your business model, your marketing strategy, right? Your messaging strategy, all of those kinds of things are what you're asking yourself when you say, how clear are you? Right? And I am a big fan that if you are not, 8, 9, or 10, right? Something that is pretty high in clarity in these areas that I'm referencing, then share about your niche, share about your topic, engage with your audience. It again, these questions are not designed to say, well, if you're not clear, then don't post. No, that's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that if you are not clear, then what you post should be different. A lot of times people are posting in order to get clear, right? It's like, well, I've been posting for 45 days and no one has been interested in my new thing. And it's like, you're not clear enough in order to create quality content in order for them to be interested in the offer, right? Execution is not the best way to get clear. It doesn't mean don't post. It just means, oh, instead of me trying to sell my offer from day one, right, on social media because I have this urgency to make money, right? Instead of me doing that, I'm actually going to demonstrate my expertise as an example, right? And a lot of this is just you managing your expectation. If I am not clear, I can still do some level of action and execution and activity, but I am going to manage my expectation on the back end because clarity is key. Okay. So that's the first question. The second question is, well, what is your goal? Right? Sometimes people are re entering and they're trying to validate an offer. Sometimes people are re entering and they want to make some money. Sometimes people are re entering and they're just trying to get in the habit of posting on social again, et cetera, et cetera. There could be any number of goals that you have, right? If clarity is your goal, then I would say push less content and more kind of behind the scenes, what you got going on type of thing. If validation is the goal, right, then you're going to push more sales content, right? If you're trying to make sales, then you're going to want to do some kind of conversion mechanism, right? Doesn't mean you have to go full into a workshop challenge webinar. You could, depending on your capacity, right? But sales content for sure, conversations for sure, right? So then the question becomes again, number two, what is your goal? Are you trying to make money in the next month or two? Are you trying to get clear about something in the next month or two? Are you trying to validate again? Am I just trying to build my muscle of writing on social or doing lives or whatever? Okay. Last question. What resources do you have? Right? When I say resources, we're talking about money, time, skills, team, actual physical product. If you sell a physical product or digital assets, all of those types of things are resources, aka assets. And each of these changes the approach, right? So let's just say uh, I have a lot of time, right? I'm thinking of a handful of clients that have sold their company and now they have more time than they've ever had. Okay, well, how they might re enter the market might be very different, right? For some versus someone who has maybe they went back and got a job, right? And now they're trying to restart their business, but they have a full-time gig, right? That they're also competing with. So how they might re-enter different, right? So that's just an example of time, but you can think about the same thing related to money and team and skills and, physical product assets kind of things, all of those. The way you answer each of those questions will help you develop a strategy that fits you and your circumstances, right? After you ask yourself these questions, the other thing that I think is always great is decide if you're wanting to do something fun and light, right? It's essentially asking yourself, what are you optimizing for? Right? I'm optimizing for simplicity. I'm optimizing for fun. I'm optimizing for re-engagement of my audience, et cetera, et cetera. Right? Because if you're optimizing for like recreating momentum, the task and the way you're going to approach re-entry is very different, right? Than if you're not optimizing for recreating momentum. Not to say that you don't want to recreate momentum, but there's a difference. This is the example that I like to give. We all want to feel safe, especially as women. Safety is one of our core needs. But there's a difference between feeling safe and optimizing my entire life for safety, right? So you can want to create or recreate momentum after some kind of pause, right? That's the universal part. But that doesn't mean you're optimizing for recreating momentum. You see the difference? If I'm optimizing for safety, then I live in a padded room. Guess what? I'm super safe. I made it virtually impossible for me to get hurt. I don't talk to other people, or I don't go to places. I don't blah 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 blah. Right? And it's like obviously that's an extreme example, but you get the difference between wanting to feel safe and it being very important versus optimizing your entire life for safety. And sometimes we don't understand the difference between uh, recreating momentum in our business versus optimizing our entire business for recreating momentum. You get to choose which side that you're on. What I will say is that depending on what you're optimizing for, oh, I want it to be easy, I want it to be light, I want it to be fun, right? But I also want to recreate momentum quickly. Sometimes those two things can be opposing each other, right? That's a whole different episode, okay? But it is helpful to know what you're optimizing for. I will tell you that inside of the Pivot School, one of the main ways that we teach this balance of like re entering the marketplace with all of the goals. Like, oh, I want to, re-engage my audience or create a new audience. I also want to validate my offer. I also want to just get in the habit of showing up, blah, blah, blah. Like, all the things is we teach a weightless strategy, right? Especially depending on, the assets, the resources that people come with, right? A lot of times they don't have a big audience. They don't have a lot of the things. And so we love a weightless strategy, right? Where you are able to build the offer semi in public, right? You're sharing different things that you're doing with the offer that you're focused on, and you're having conversations to inform, some of your product development and your program development. Um, we personally are anti sell it first and then create it later. Anti it. I have seen that piece of advice create more poor programs and decrease retention than probably any other advice on the internet, right? I say this all the time that it is easier to keep a client than it is to go off and get a new client. Even though we all understand that, our behaviors don't always reflect that understanding, right? So, what we don't like is to go off and sell a program that you have done no creation for or very little creation for, because it almost always results in low retention. Okay. But we also don't want you spending months and months and months creating the wrong thing, right? So I understand why people give that advice. It just lacks a ton of context, lacks a ton of nuance, right? And it doesn't show you how to find the balance to where you can still retain people as compared to them being annoyed at your mediocre program. So the weightless strategy that we use helps you find that balance, because we literally do not want you spending the next 3 months creating something that nobody wants, or something that you don't end up selling that doesn't align with your offer or your audience, etc., or your goals, right? So our process allows for you to create enough of the offer, right, to feel confident selling it, and most importantly, to deliver on your promise, right? While simultaneously building an audience, right? Specifically for that offer. Okay. So if you have questions about anything, as usual, any episodes that you listen to, if you have questions, thoughts, feedbacks, I have people who DM me on Facebook regularly about something that they heard in the podcast. So feel free, right? Feel free to pop into my inbox with questions or comments, or just to say, I love this episode. This one was great, right? And if you specifically want to help lay out your strategy for re entering, you can just DM me the word re-enter, right? And we can talk through the best place, for you specifically to restart.